Right now, as you're watching this video, there are over 4,000 abandoned theme parks scattered across the globe. Places where children's laughter once echoed through cotton candy-scented air. But now, only the wind moves through rusted rides and broken dreams. What I'm about to share with you tonight comes from leaked security footage, suppressed incident reports, and first-hand accounts from urban explorers who barely escaped with their sanity intact. These aren't just ghost stories passed down through internet forums. These are documented encounters with something that defies explanation. Something that feeds on the lingering joy these places once held and has twisted it into pure, concentrated terror. The theme park corporations don't want you to know what happens when the gates close for the final time, when the power is cut, and when the last employee walks away. Because these places don't truly die, they transform into something hungry, something patient, something that still operates rides for visitors who never bought tickets and will never leave. Tonight, I'm taking you inside 5 locations where the impossible becomes inevitable, where every creak of metal and whisper of wind carries the weight of tragedy, and where you'll discover that some rides are designed to last forever. But I have to warn you, once you hear these stories, you'll never look at a carnival the same way again, because you'll know the truth. When the music stops playing, that's when the real show begins. Story 1. The Carousel That Never Stops. August 2019, Six Flags Jazzland, New Orleans. Urban explorer Marcus Chen had investigated over 200 abandoned locations, armed with thermal cameras and a skeptical mind that systematically debunked every ghost story he encountered. But the message he received at 2:47 a.m. changed everything. The carousel at Jazzland is running again. Every night, no power, no explanation. 14 years after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and left Six Flags Jazzland as a flooded monument to destruction, Marcus entered the abandoned park at midnight, following reports that defied logic. The antique 1906 carousel, hand-carved by the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, had somehow survived the hurricane's wrath, while modern steel structures around it twisted and broke. As Marcus approached with his night vision equipment, his EMF detector began screaming, and impossible readings spiked beyond measurement. Then, at exactly midnight, he heard it, the ghostly melody of the Wurlitzer organ, playing in a park that had been without power for over a decade. What his cameras captured next violated every law of physics. The carousel horses began to move independently, rising and falling on their poles, turning their painted heads to follow his movement with eyes that reflected light from sources that didn't exist. Marcus discovered that this carousel carried a dark legacy spanning 7 different parks and 113 years of operation at every location. Children had mysteriously disappeared while riding it. Through audio spectrum analysis, he identified 17 distinct children's voices from different eras, all speaking the same haunting invitation: come ride with us. The carousel never stops. Security footage from Jazzland's final week revealed the horrifying truth. Every night after closing, the carousel operated for an audience of ghostly children, 17 missing souls, spanning over a century, all trapped in a single moment of perfect joy by the carousel's occult mechanisms. The ride's creator, Wilhelm Zimmermann, had been a German immigrant accused of witchcraft, who embedded binding runes within the hand-carved decorations, designing the carousel to capture and preserve children's innocent joy forever. Now, these 17 children ride eternal horses through endless nights, their life force powering the carousel's perpetual motion, forever young, forever playing, forever trapped in supernatural amber, while the carousel continues its nightly operation, still hungry for new riders to join its ghostly collection. Story 2. The Screaming Coaster Pripyat Amusement Park was scheduled for its grand opening on May 1, 1986, a celebration that never came. Instead, the Chernobyl disaster transformed it into a frozen monument to nuclear horror, where Ferris wheels and bumper cars stand as silent witnesses to humanity's greatest atomic catastrophe. The rides remain exactly as they were left, waiting for children who will never come. In a city where time stopped at 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, Dr. Elena Bascas, a radiation researcher documenting contamination levels in 2019, was taking Geiger counter readings near the roller coaster when she heard something that made her blood freeze. screaming that wasn't human, emanating from the empty coaster cars that had never carried a single passenger. Her equipment went haywire as the sounds grew louder and more distorted, revealing frequencies beyond human vocal range captured on her recording devices. Audio analysis suggested something impossible. The radiation itself had somehow become conscious, trapped within the metal framework of the rides, and transformed into something that could vocalize its atomic agony. Thermal imaging revealed unexplained heat signatures moving through the empty roller coaster cars, in patterns that suggested invisible passengers taking a ride through nuclear nightmare. Local guides who brave the exclusion zone whisper warnings to never climb into the Phantom Coaster's cars, because those who do report an overwhelming compulsion to never leave, as if the radiation doesn't just poison the body, but imprisons the soul in an eternal loop of atomic terror. The coaster operates on its own schedule, running ghost trains filled with the radioactive echoes of joy that was never experienced, powered by the same energy that split atoms and created the world's most contaminated playground. Visitors describe feeling watched by invisible eyes and hearing the laughter of children who never got to play, their potential joy transformed by gamma rays into something far more sinister. The screaming continues every night, growing louder during periods of high radiation activity, as if the very atoms remember what they destroyed and cry out in perpetual anguish. This isn't just a haunted amusement park. It's a place where nuclear physics collided with childhood wonder and created something that defies both scientific explanation and human comprehension, where the screams of split atoms merge with the phantom laughter of children who never got their promised day of fun, creating a symphony of atomic horror that echoes through the abandoned city, where time itself was irradiated and stands forever frozen at the moment when everything went wrong. Story 3. The Funhouse Mirror Maze Spreepark in Berlin operated as East Germany's only amusement park until 2002, when financial ruin finally claimed this relic of communist-era entertainment. Among its abandoned attractions, the Funhouse Mirror Maze remained mysteriously intact until scheduled demolition in 2018, its cracked mirrors reflecting nothing but darkness and decay for 16 years. Urban exploration team Dark Heritage entered the maze in October 2018 to document the mirrors before demolition, equipped with helmet cameras and communication devices to navigate the labyrinthine corridors safely. Team member Sarah Liu, an experienced explorer who had documented over 50 abandoned sites across Europe, became separated from her group while navigating the maze's twisted pathways lined with warped mirrors that had once distorted reality for children's amusement. Her helmet camera captured something that defied explanation. Her reflection began moving independently in the cracked mirror surfaces, showing different expressions, different ages, different versions of herself that existed only in the glass. As Sarah panicked and desperately searched for the exit, every mirror she encountered showed increasingly disturbing reflections, some showing her as a child, others as an elderly woman, some depicting her dying, and others revealing her decomposing corpse. The maze seemed to expand infinitely around her, with new corridors appearing that hadn't existed moments before, while her reflections multiplied exponentially until hundreds of different Sarahs stared back at her from impossible angles. Her frantic radio calls to her team revealed her growing terror. The mirrors are showing me things that haven't happened yet. I can see myself dying in here. I can see all the ways I could die. 3 hours later, her team finally located her, standing catatonic before a mirror that reflected only perfect blackness, her eyes wide within terror that transcended human comprehension. Sarah hasn't spoken since that day, not a single word in over 6 years. But medical examinations reveal she's physically unharmed, though brain scans show activity patterns unlike anything doctors have seen before. The most disturbing detail emerged during her psychological evaluation. When Sarah looks into any mirror now, her reflection shows someone else entirely, a young girl in 1980s East German clothing who appears to be trapped behind the glass, desperately trying to communicate. Psychiatrists theorize that the Funhouse mirrors, exposed to decades of children's fears and anxieties about their own appearances, had absorbed and concentrated these insecurities until they became a psychological prison that could trap consciousness itself within reflective surfaces. The maze was demolished as planned, but the mirrors were never destroyed. They were sold to collectors across Europe. And reports continued to surface of people becoming lost in their own reflections, trapped in glass prisons where every possible version of themselves exists, simultaneously in eternal, terrifying clarity. Story 4. The Puppet, SHOWOHHO, Island, operated from 1986 to 1986 to 1999. But its closure wasn't due to financial problems. It was the result of a series of child disappearances that local authorities could never explain. The park's final attraction to close was the Marionette Puppet Theater, a traditional Korean performance space where handcrafted wooden puppets told folktales to delighted children every afternoon at 3 p.m. sharp. Between 1995 and 1999, 7 children were reported missing after attending puppet shows, with witnesses stating they had seen the children enter the theater, but security cameras never recorded them leaving. The final security guard, Kim Min-jin, was completing his last rounds on the park's closing night in December 1999 when he heard the unmistakable sound of children's voices, singing traditional Korean songs from inside the supposedly empty puppet theater. Against protocol, Kim investigated and discovered something that aged him 20 years in a single night. The marionettes were performing without human operators, their strings moving by invisible hands in perfect choreographic harmony. The wooden puppets were reenacting the disappearances with horrifying accuracy, showing children being led away by a tall, shadowy figure that seemed to exist only in the puppet dimension, while Korean folk songs played from speakers that had been disconnected for months. As Kim watched in mesmerized horror, the puppets turned their painted faces toward him with movements that defied their wooden joints, their carved smiles somehow appearing hungry and desperate. He tried to leave, but found every exit sealed by invisible barriers, trapping him in the theater with dozens of marionettes that began performing a new show, his own disappearance, complete with a wooden puppet that looked exactly like him, being dragged into the shadow realm behind the stage. The puppet version of Kim screamed with his own voice as it was consumed by darkness, while the missing children's puppets applauded with wooden hands that shouldn't have been able to move. Kim was discovered the next morning by demolition workers, his hair completely white and his face etched with wrinkles that hadn't been there 12 hours earlier, clutching a small wooden puppet that bore an uncanny resemblance to the first missing child. Under psychiatric evaluation, Kim insisted that the 7 missing children had been transformed into marionettes, their souls trapped within the carved wood while their bodies fed some ancient hunger that lived behind the puppet theater's stage. He claimed to have seen them performing their eternal show every night since 1995, reenacting their own disappearances while waiting for new children to join their wooden cast. The puppet theater was demolished in 2000, but the marionettes were never found. They had vanished overnight, leaving only their strings hanging from the ceiling like a forest of abandoned nooses. Reports continue to emerge from across South Korea of traditional puppet shows, where the marionettes perform without operators, always ending with children in the audience mysteriously disappearing, suggesting that these wooden performers are still touring the country, still hungry for new cast members to join their endless, horrifying production where childhood wonder becomes eternal, wooden captivity. Story 5. The final R.I. Lake Shawnee amusement park in West Virginia holds the grim distinction of being America's most haunted attraction. Built in 1926 on land that has been claiming children's lives for over 800 years, the park operated for 40 years before permanently closing in 1966, following multiple child fatalities. But what makes this location truly terrifying isn't just the documented deaths, it's the archaeological evidence revealing that this cursed ground has been a supernatural collection point for centuries. Paranormal investigator Robert Hayes arrived in October 2020 with a mission to scientifically debunk the legends surrounding Lake Shawnee. Armed with thermal imaging equipment, electromagnetic field detectors, and a lifetime of rational skepticism, what he discovered during his week-long investigation transformed him from a debunker into a true believer who would ultimately become another victim of the park's insatiable hunger. On his third night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., the precise time that 6-year-old Mabel Gaylord fell from the swing ride and died in 1966, the rusted swing set began operating on its own, its chains creaking in perfect rhythm, despite having no mechanical power source for over 50 years. Robert's thermal imaging cameras revealed the impossible. child-sized heat signatures sitting in the moving swings. Dozens of them spanning different time periods, as evidenced by the varying clothing. Styles visible only through his specialized equipment. These weren't just the documented victims from the park's operational. Years archaeological surveys conducted by West Virginia University had uncovered evidence of Native American children who had disappeared near the lake, dating back to 1200 AD, suggesting that this location had been cursed long before white settlers arrived. The Shawnee tribe's oral histories, recorded by ethnographies in the 1800s, spoke of a malevolent spirit that lived beneath the lake and demanded young souls as payment for disturbing sacred burial grounds. A supernatural entity that had been feeding on children's life force for 8 centuries. As Robert approached the swing ride with his cameras rolling, the spectral children turned to look at him with eyes that held centuries of accumulated pain and loss. Their ghostly forms representing not just individual tragedies, but an entire collection of stolen childhoods spanning multiple civilizations. His audio equipment captured their voices, some speaking English with 1950s accents, others using Native American languages, and still others communicating in tongues that predated recorded history, all pleading for him to join their eternal playground where the rides never stop and the pain never ends. Robert's final footage, discovered after his disappearance 3 weeks later, shows him backing away in terror as more children materialized around the swing ride, their numbers growing to biblical proportions as the camera captures what he describes as an army of the lost, the forgotten, the abandoned, collecting souls for something bigger than individual hauntings. The swing ride wasn't just haunted, it was a supernatural nexus where every child who had ever died at an amusement park anywhere in America eventually found their way, drawn by an ancient curse that transformed childhood joy into eternal servitude. Robert's car was found in the parking lot, with the engine running and doors open, but he was never seen again. Though security cameras from nearby Route 62 captured footage of a small figure matching his description sitting in one of the swings at 3 a.m., swinging higher and higher into the darkness until he disappeared completely into whatever dimension claims the children of Lake Shawnee, where innocence goes to die and childhood wonder becomes an eternal prison from which there is no escape. Only the endless motion of swings that carry souls deeper into supernatural darkness with each passing night.